Imagine waking up every morning feeling happy. Not the quiet, complicated happiness you earn through struggle and meaning, but a smooth, guaranteed, chemically delivered happiness. No grief, no anger, no boredom, just a warm, pleasant hum that carries you through each perfectly engineered day. Sounds pretty good, right? Now imagine that in exchange for that happiness, you gave up art, you gave up religion, you gave up love, family, truth, and the freedom to ask dangerous questions. You gave up everything that makes you human, and you did it willingly because you were conditioned from birth to never want those things in the first place. That is the world Aldous Huxley built in 1932 in a novel called Brave New World. And nearly a century later, it doesn't feel like science fiction. It feels like a warning that arrived too early for us to take seriously, and that we may be finally living out. Today, we're going to walk through this book together. We'll meet its characters, unpack its ideas, and by the end, I think you'll find yourself asking a question that Huxley very much wanted you to ask. Is a perfect world actually worth living in? Let's begin. The story takes place in the year 632 after Ford, meaning 632 years after the introduction of the Model T car, which the society worships as a kind of god. Henry Ford, the man who industrialized production, has become a deity. His name replaces God in people's expressions. They say, "Oh, Ford," the way we might say, "Oh my God." This detail is Huxley's first dark joke, and it sets the tone for everything that follows. The civilization is called the World State, and its motto is 3 words: community, identity, stability. It sounds reassuring. It is, in fact, a cage. In this world, human beings are no longer born, they are manufactured. Babies are grown in bottles in vast factories called hatcheries, engineered and chemically adjusted before they ever take their first breath. Each person is created to belong to one of 5 castes: alphas at the top, betas just below, and then gammas, deltas, and epsilons at the bottom. The lower castes are deliberately stunted, deprived of oxygen during development, chemically slowed, to make them capable of only the simplest tasks. They are happy to be what they are, because they were made to be happy to be what they are. This is the first layer of the horror. Not that the system is cruel in an obvious way, it's that it's invisible. No one is oppressed by a tyrant shouting orders. The oppression is baked into biology, into childhood conditioning, into the very architecture of consciousness. And the conditioning doesn't stop at birth. Children are subjected to a process called hypnopedia, sleep teaching, where social norms and moral lessons are whispered into their ears hundreds of thousands of times while they sleep. By the time a child grows up, they don't think the world state's values, they feel them. The way you feel disgust at the thought of eating rotten food. The revulsion is instinctive. It doesn't need to be reasoned. It just is. Adults are kept content through a drug called soma. Soma is the perfect narcotic. It provides bliss with no hangover, pleasure with no consequence, escape with no cost. Whenever life becomes uncomfortable, whenever a flicker of genuine emotion threatens to surface, a person takes soma and floats away into warm nothing. The government distributes it freely, enthusiastically. It is the final tool of control, dressed as a gift. Sex is recreational and expected to be meaningless. Deep emotional bonds between people, especially between parents and children, are considered obscene, even dangerous. The words mother and father are used like slurs. Everyone belongs to everyone else, which is another way of saying no one truly belongs to anyone. This is the world. Now, let's meet the people who live in it. Our first entry point into this world is Bernard Marx, an alpha, one of the elites, but a troubled one. Bernard is physically small for his caste, and there are whispered rumors that alcohol got into his blood surrogate during development. He feels wrong, out of place. He thinks too much. He wants things he isn't supposed to want, like solitude, like genuine connection, like the feeling of something real. Bernard is not exactly a hero. Huxley is careful about that. He's petulant, insecure, vain. He doesn't reject the world state because he has some noble philosophical vision. He rejects it because it has rejected him. He feels like an outsider, and that resentment is his motivation, not wisdom. This is important. Huxley is not asking us to admire Bernard. He's asking us to recognize him. Bernard works in the Psychology Bureau and has a colleague and confidant named Helmholtz Watson, a man who is the opposite of Bernard in every way. Helmholtz is brilliantly handsome, socially successful, beloved. And yet he too feels a strange hollowness, a sense that his talents as a writer are being wasted on shallow propaganda. He can feel that language could do something, say something enormous and true, but he doesn't yet know what. These two men, broken in different ways, circle each other as friends. Bernard arranges to take a trip to a savage reservation, one of the few remaining places in the world where people still live outside the world state's control, in primitive, messy, unengineered human conditions. He brings along a woman named Lenina Crown, a cheerful, beautiful beta who is almost perfectly conditioned. She follows every social rule, takes her soma, and is baffled by Bernard's moody discontent. The reservation, in world state terms, is grotesque. People age, they get sick, women give birth the old way. There is religion, ritual, suffering, dirt, and death. And in the middle of all this, Bernard and Lenina encounter a remarkable young man named John. John is the son of a world state woman named Linda, who was accidentally left behind on the reservation years ago after a visit. Linda couldn't return, so she raised John in this alien world, half teaching him the civilization she came from while he grew up surrounded by Pueblo culture and ritual. He learned to read from a single book his mother had with her, the complete works of William Shakespeare. So John is a man built from two incompatible worlds. He knows Hamlet and King Lear by heart, but he has also been excluded and mocked by the people of the reservation, who see him as an outsider. He's a man without a tribe, and when Bernard offers to take him back to civilization, what John romantically calls the other place, he goes with a heart full of hope. John arrives in London, and the world state is immediately enchanted by him. He's exotic, handsome, strange. They call him the Savage, a name he accepts, but that slowly begins to corrode him. The director of hatcheries, humiliated when Bernard reveals that the director himself fathered John on the reservation, resigns in disgrace. The concept of fatherhood is so revolting in this culture that the exposure destroys him socially. Bernard rides this wave of notoriety to a brief, shallow popularity he has always craved. But John is devastated by what he finds. The civilization he imagined from Shakespeare's plays, full of passion, beauty, and meaning, is not this place. This place is clean and comfortable and utterly hollow. He falls deeply in love with Lenina, but her response is purely physical, perfectly conditioned. She doesn't understand his reverence. He can't accept her casualness. The collision between them is one of the book's most painful scenes, and it ends in fury and humiliation. His mother Linda, returned to the world state, spends her last weeks drowning in soma, taking it in such vast quantities that it kills her. When she dies in a hospital ward, surrounded by conditioned children who have been taught to view death with cheerful indifference, John weeps at her bedside, and the children stare at him as though he is performing some incomprehensible ritual. He is grieving. He is the only person in the building who knows how. The novel reaches its philosophical summit in a long conversation between John and one of the world controllers, Mustapha Mond, a brilliant and almost likable ruler, who is in many ways the most honest man in the book. Mond explains the logic of the world state without apology. Happiness, he argues, requires the elimination of everything that makes people unhappy. That means eliminating truth, because truth is often painful. It means eliminating art, because real art arises from suffering and conflict. It means eliminating God, because people who believe in God also believe in consequences, guilt, and the soul, ideas that destabilize a consumer society. John pushes back. He wants truth. He wants beauty. He wants danger and freedom, and even the right to be miserable. Mond smiles and acknowledges it. Yes, he says, you're claiming the right to be unhappy. And John says, yes, exactly that. It is one of the most powerful exchanges in 20th century literature, and it is not a debate either side wins cleanly. Mond is not a fool or a monster. He understands what has been sacrificed. He simply chose a different value and built a world around it. Bernard and Helmholtz are exiled to islands, a kind of honorable removal for those who think too differently. Mond admits with something almost like envy that the islands are full of the most interesting people in the world. John retreats to an abandoned lighthouse outside London, trying to live in solitude, trying to purify himself through work and prayer and self-flagellation in the way he absorbed from the reservation's rituals. But the world state follows him. The press discovers him. Tourists arrive to watch the savage hurt himself as entertainment. They film it. They share it. He becomes a spectacle. In a final scene of horror and degradation, John, confronted with a crowd that had turned his suffering into a party, loses himself entirely. He participates in the same orgiastic frenzy he despises. When he wakes up the next morning and understands what he has done, there is nothing left. He hangs himself. It is not a triumphant ending. It is not even a tragic one in the classical sense. It is something quieter and more devastating, the erasure of a person who simply could not survive in a world that had no room for the kind of person he was. Huxley wrote Brave New World in 1932 as a satirical response to utopian optimism, the belief that science and technology would solve the human condition. He was worried about a very specific kind of totalitarianism, not the boot-on-the-face kind that Orwell would later describe in 1984, but the velvet kind, control through comfort, oppression through pleasure. What is remarkable is how much of his fiction has quietly become our reality, not through any conspiracy, but simply through the logic of markets, attention, and convenience. We carry devices that track our preferences and learn to give us exactly what we want, exactly when we want it. We live in media environments designed by algorithms to keep us comfortable, entertained, and engaged, not informed, not challenged. The pharmaceutical industry has produced a generation of mood management medications that genuinely help millions and also raise urgent questions about where treatment ends and numbing begins. Social media offers us community without depth, connection without commitment, identity without introspection. We are not the world state, but we are perhaps on a road that leads somewhere like it. Not because rulers are forcing us there, but because we are choosing it, happily, one comfort at a time. The question Huxley plants in us is a difficult one. If happiness is the goal, does it matter how we get it? If a person is content, does it matter whether that contentment came from meaning or from chemistry? If a society is stable, does it matter what it had to sacrifice to become so? Most of us would say yes, instinctively. But Huxley's genius is that he makes you earn that answer. He makes you sit with the world state long enough to see its appeal, to feel its seductive pull, and then he shows you John, the only fully human character in the book, and what happens to him. The book is also a meditation on what art is for. Mond tells John that the world state can't allow genuine art because genuine art requires conflict, passion, instability, the things that make people suffer. You cannot have King Lear in a world without tragedy. You cannot have the Sistine Chapel without obsession and sacrifice. A comfortable world produces comfortable art, which is to say it produces entertainment, and entertainment and art are very different things, even if they sometimes look the same. Here is the core of what Aldous Huxley was trying to tell us. Suffering is not the enemy of a good life. Meaninglessness is. A life without struggle, without genuine love, without the freedom to ask hard questions and sit with difficult answers is not a better life, it is simply a safer one. And safety, purchased at the cost of everything that makes us us, is not salvation. It is a very comfortable kind of death. John the Savage dies because the world state has no category for the kind of person he is, someone who would choose pain over emptiness, truth over tranquility, the full dangerous weight of being human over the smooth numbness of being managed. He is, in Huxley's imagination, the last fully alive person on earth, and the world kills him, not with violence, but with indifference. The most unsettling thing about Brave New World is not that it describes a distant dystopia, it's that it describes a destination that is genuinely appealing. The world state does not promise fire and darkness, it promises warmth, ease, belonging, an end to loneliness and confusion and heartbreak. And the question it leaves ringing in the air long after you close the book is simply this: how much of yourself would you trade for that? Think about it.